Please be seated. Do not let your hearts be troubled. Jesus offers those words that we just heard in the gospel to the disciples who find themselves pretty dismayed when Jesus tells them what is ahead for him. Just crucifixion, death on a cross, great suffering. They pretty much gloss over the whole, but 3 days later, I'm going to rise from the dead part. And that shows that they are human. I lean on those words today, but today I find them of little comfort, for my heart is troubled. My heart is broken. This does not mean I don't believe completely in the rest of what Jesus tells them. I do, with all my heart. And I have more to say about those words shortly. But right now, I look out at family and friends of Jerry Pelly and say, Lord, our hearts are troubled. We were not ready for this. We needed more time. I can tell you this, seminary does not warn the yet to be ordained about these moments. They don't tell you along the way that not only will you preside and preach over funerals of beloved parishioners, but you will also, without a doubt, be called on to do the same for family members and dear friends. I remember asking the priest who supervised my field education when I was in seminary. We were preparing for a funeral in that parish, and I said, well, when do the priests get to grieve? And his chilling response was, we don't. Well, he was a great priest and is still a good friend, as now he's a bishop, but he was wrong. We do, because just like the disciples, we are human, just like anyone else. And the truth is today that I'm very sad. Trust me, Carol and Dennis are sad also. It's just the truth. But here we are, and I'm honored to be here, and I'm honored to be asked to preach. And I'm so grateful for Jerry, for his life, for his friendship, for his love, for his humor. Grace is kind of another way to say all that. In thinking about Jerry, a few things come to mind. One is a line from a song from those prominent 21st century theologians, a band called Snow Patrol. You're familiar with them? You may have heard their song called Chasing Cars. It was featured on that great religious program, Grey's Anatomy, quite a few years ago. And I remember I really liked that song, so I downloaded it to my phone. And there's a line in it, though, that has always struck me as profound and so true in many relationships that we all have. Interestingly, if you listen to that song on the radio, they omit this line, but it is in the full cut. And I knew one day it would make it into a funeral sermon. Today's the day. It is perfectly fitting. They sing this: I need your grace to remind me to find my own. That was Jerry for me. A man who exuded grace. It poured out of him in his love for his family. His grace was so evident to all of us here in the hospitality he always extended. He truly was someone who would do anything for you. Linda is cut from the same cloth. You make a team of graciousness. Around 15 years ago, I woke up from minor surgery in Gulfport, Mississippi, and there's Jerry and Linda standing by my bed at the outpatient center. And I expressed surprise, of course, and was even probably fussed at them for coming all that way for such a minor thing. And they said, well, we heard Jennifer was going to be in that waiting room by herself. And this is just what you do. He also said, I heard someone needed some help up here in Gulfport. That line may be familiar, I hope, to some that are here today. If any of you were part of the group of us that went together to a Promise Keepers event in Memphis, Tennessee in the early 90s. Promise Keepers was a gathering for men to come and sing and pray and be preached to. And Jerry took a van load of us from St. Peter's, including Barry Cotter, our priest at the time. And on the way up there from Jackson to Memphis, we did stop along the way and buy some cold beverages to have in the van. And as we pulled up to the hotel we're staying in Memphis, we see all these church vans there. Jerry was just his regular van, right? And it's Baptist this and Methodist this and Pentecostal that. And we come pouring out of the van, and it's possible some of us kicked some of those cans out into the parking lot at that time. It wasn't me, it's these other guys. And we were looking at this van load of mostly teenagers from this Baptist church just staring at us, their mouths wide open, their eyes wide open, and they're wondering, what kind of conference is this Promise Keepers thing after all? And Jerry gets out of the driver's seat, walks between us and them, and just kind of shakes his head. He said, I don't know who they are. I picked them up on the way here. Well, at that conference, one of the preachers kept using this line. I heard someone call out they needed some help up here in Memphis. So I came, and it became a tagline for Jerry and I. Every time I would see him, when they would come visit us in seminary in Chicago, Jerry would say, I heard somebody needs some help up here in Chicago. And even to the last time that they visited us where we now live in the Florida Panhandle, I heard somebody needs some help down here in Pensacola. Our last trip to hang out with you guys. He always said that. I heard you could use some help up here. Linda shared another great story from when they had been married just a year. They moved to Jackson. They met and married in Hawaii, and Jerry was being introduced at the Rotary Club by his boss there at the Forestry Services, and Jerry had told the man when the man that was introducing him that he and Linda were married in Hawaii, and that's where they met, and they spent their honeymoon at the famous Volcano House. And the man introducing Jerry said that Jerry had spent his honeymoon on top of a volcano. No further comment from the preacher about that. But I do hear Linda was called Miss Volcano by all the Rotarians for years after that. Former rector here at St. Peter's and dear friend of many of us, Barry Cotter, wrote me to say this about Jerry. He said, when you shook hands with Jerry Pelly on a Sunday morning or chatted with him, you got the clear sense that here was a man of substance, character-wise, grounded and happy in his life with Linda and the children, his farm up in Missouri, whatever he was involved in. This wasn't a loud, aggressive thing, Barry said. He just was this centered man who knew who he was and how it was that God had blessed him. And he communicated with everyone a kind of appreciative joy. It's a great description. I think you've all been blessed by Jerry's grace, right? When we were meeting to plan this service, we were talking about how the servant song just fits him so perfectly. If you knew him, you know that. What better song to remember Jerry Pelly by? I can hear him singing it. I heard someone needed some help up here, so let me be like Christ to you. That's not exactly how it goes, I don't think, but something like that. Let me be like Christ to you. We needed Jerry to live that kind of servanthood for us. We needed always his grace to remind us to find our own. I know I did. Now, a huge part of that grace I heard over and over again had to do with family and the friends that they considered family, and Jennifer and I are honored to be in that club. Jerry was the kind of person who worked hard to include family, to make trips to see people, even went hundreds of miles out of their way to visit their son-in-law's grandmother in a nursing home. That's grace to find our own. The blessing of time with his brother after getting the Piedmont place, many people talked about. Malia told me she called him once when he was in Piedmont right after he got in a tractor. I'm sure it was a John Deere. And she said, what are you doing? He said, well, I'm digging some holes. The next day she called him back and he said, he's on a tractor again. She said, what are you doing? So I'm filling those holes back up. Wasn't that Jerry? Always moving, right? Piddling, helping, loving. And John called it being industrious, which I like that term. He certainly was that. And wrapped up in all of that, John reminded me of Jerry's deep love of just getting people together. It's become a lost art, right? Living proof, John told me, of how much relationships matter. Both Malia and John spoke of that and how that has influenced their own lives tremendously and how it will impact their families, their children, and their children's children forever. It's kind of grace running downhill, isn't it? That's a legacy. That's what you want to leave. Now, Pat alluded to this a little bit. You might could say that Jerry Pelly had some maybe strong opinions about some things. We had a lot of long talks, especially after that, quoting him, liberal seminary got a hold of me. He was very concerned about that. But these talks were great. I loved those times because we may have disagreed strongly. He was always willing to listen, perhaps even sometimes to learn from others' opinions. And I wish the whole world was like that. We have lost that ability. Jerry lived it. That's part of the grace to find our own. Remembering that and living that way. Because he knew me and loved me and maybe trusted me a little bit, we could have those conversations together. Think of that in your own lives. Relationships make all the difference. Think of Jerry when you're having those conversations. Yeah, we are heartbroken, and we grieve. But in our grief, we also give thanks. Linda, Malia, John, I'm so grateful Jerry retired early enough to spend so much time with all of you, and of late with your children. Linda, I'm thankful for all the travels, all those pictures, overseas, 6 out of 7 continents, I think, driving in an RV. So many memories you must have of so many spectacular places and even more spectacular people. I know we all wish those travels together could continue, but I pray you will find solace and laughter and blessing in those sweet memories. Truly a blessing. I think we still need his grace. We will always need Jerry's grace. We need that reminder to find our own, and when we think of Jerry, we will have that. The first lesson from wisdom says the souls of the righteous are in the hands of God, but the memories and the inspiration of them remain with us as well. And I know this church, St. Peter's, lost another wonderful member recently, Jane Horn. Jane was very, very special to Jennifer and I. And I was told the story, I hope I have it right, that her granddaughter told Jane having a dream shortly before she died. And Jane Claire asked her, what were you dreaming? She said, well, I was up at the pearly gates and they were locked. Sounds like Jane was ready. She's such a dear soul. But it made me think about Jerry's approach to those pearly gates. To gain entrance to that place that Jesus, we heard in the gospel, had already prepared just for him, where there's no sorrow or pain, there's just joy and everlasting life. And in my mind, I pictured Jerry at those gates, ready to go in, but hesitating and turning and seeing other souls on their way. Can't you see him just kind of stopping and helping other people? You go ahead. You could come. This is where we're going. Come on, I will help you. That's grace. I should just imagine that for him. Reminds us to find our own. And Jerry looking at St. Peter and saying with a smile, I heard you needed some help up in here. And then Jesus, our Lord, as he promises in that gospel Dennis read for us, comes to him and takes him to the place prepared for him. That's what the gospel says, prepared for you. And I like to think that gospel promise is personal for each of us. So I want you to maybe take a second and imagine what place Jesus prepared for Jerry Pelly. Surely there's room for him to tinker. It's got to be a tractor. And I'm sure much of it is outdoors. As much as I hate to admit it, there's probably a St. Louis Cardinal banner. Cub fan for life, I'm sorry. And of course, surrounded, right, by family and friends to talk to. If no one's there, there's a post for him to talk to as well. Oh, Jerry, thank you for reminding us to find our own grace by living yours. And yeah, we still need some help down here. But it is your legacy and our memories of you that will be that help to us all, knowing that we will do our best to not let our hearts be troubled. That's a big task. But our hearts are bigger and more full because we knew you. And we're much better people because we are loved by you. May you rest in peace and rise in glory, you beloved, grace-filled, grace-giving child of God. Amen.